All right, so we looked at subitizing yesterday, or subitizing, it's up to you. And I looked at the importance of doing numbers up to 3 to begin with, or amounts up to 3. So 1, 2, 3. I don't want to recap on that too much, but I want you to know that this session builds on that. So something we then do a lot of, I want you to imagine that this training session, it's very short, mini masterclass. It's a bit like looking into a room by opening the door just a tiny bit, and you're peeping in and you're like, wow, I cannot believe all the amazing things in that cupboard, in that room, in that house, whatever, however big you want it to be. This is a mini masterclass, so it will make sense, but do not expect to know how 5 and 10 frames work at the end of 25 minutes, because no learning works like that. Okay, if you want to know how this stuff works, you have to go on a longer journey, and you have to try stuff out, and you have to come back and talk about it, and that's what my job is, to help you do that. But we will do some kind of, this is our short little taster session today. So we were learning yesterday about what 1 looks like, add another 1, so they're both 1, but together they're 2, add another 1, 3 1s, together is 3, you can still see there's a 2 and a 1 in there. Can move it to prove it, 2 and 1, lots and lots of great things. I also dispelled quite a lot of myths about subitizing, perceptual and conceptual. Be very careful what you read in some really quite official documents that are misleading and inaccurate about that. So go and listen to what I said yesterday. And also be very, very careful about the overgeneralization that subitizing is to do with dice patterns. Yes, once you understand subitizing, dice patterns are part of it. There is the dice pattern of 4 that we're really familiar with, but a person who can subitize, and we all can subitize, but a person who understands how to express that and develop that skill can say, for example, I can see 2 and 2, or I can see 3 if I don't move them this time, but 3 and 1, or I can see 4 1s, and you're seeing so much more about that number, not just that it's called 4. And I looked yesterday at how confusing counting is when we go 1 2 3 4, so it's just one of them that's called 4 when actually it's the whole thing called 4. So make sure you build what we look at today on that knowledge. All right, so my practitioners that work with me, many of whom are in the chat box here and on the call tonight, and that is what is great. There are many, many people who come along to this session who are so experienced and expert in this, my impact members, and they still all come along to hear this, and it shows you're constantly changing and growing. So even people who really know loads are coming, and they find themselves thinking about things slightly differently, or taking away a little bit of extra stuff that they just weren't ready to take away last time. So really great to be able to reinforce it. So what I'm going to show you here, first of all, when we introduce a 5 frame, and it's called a 5 frame, of course, because it's got 5 parts to it. And sorry, it's a little bit wonky. Don't look at it too closely because my cutting was not good. This is a magnetic kind of cloth that you can cut up with a Stanley knife, but don't get obsessed with that, okay? Otherwise I'll have to tell people off. If you want to know where to get it, literally just Google it. Magnetic, what would you call it? Yeah, magnetic cloth, magnetic sheets, okay? But you don't need it. You can use other things as well, which I might get into in the challenge. So one of the things we do way before we introduce any counters is we look at self-registration with our children, and we look at the idea of them arriving in school and popping photographs of themselves in this. And what we're doing is we're actually looking at the concept of full and not full, not numbers. Now, as adults, we are so obsessed with teaching our children numbers that we need to take a step back here. So I'm just going to pretend for the moment, bear with me, these would be lovely photographs normally, but this child has just arrived in school, and there's going to be a rule here. And the rule is, right, they either have to start at that side or they can start at that side. Because as we know, we're a very international group, and depending on which way you read, if you're in an Arabic country, you're going to read that way. So the main thing is that we don't just put them on anywhere, but you could start at either end. You could also, very important thing to do is change the orientation sometimes, because children and adults overgeneralize and they think that this maths only works when it's horizontal, if that's what they've only ever seen. So it's our job as well to do what we call variation and make sure, because that doesn't change the maths. You could start at the bottom, you could start at the top. Be careful that your inclination, which would probably be to start at the bottom, doesn't lead things, because the children doesn't really make any difference. But okay, so that bit is about full and not full. So first child arrives, second child arrives, and it's like, what do you notice? What do you see? Now the children are going to see the 2ness of 2, but they may not have a label for it yet. You might see them showing that many fingers. You might hear them talking about that there's still lots of space left. This idea that more children can arrive and they can fit on this board. Now that is really important maths, and really important to build this idea of a 5 frame. So another child arrives, and another child arrives, and I'm following this idea that if I started at this side, you don't just put them on anywhere, and I'll come back to that a little bit more, because again, there's a lot on the internet about putting stuff just anywhere on 5 and 10 frames, and we don't want to do that, and I'll tell you why. So next child arrives. Can you see there that they are likely to start to notice, and you'll almost get this excitement or anxiety of like, oh, we can only have one more child. They might not say one more, but they could imply that there's only space for one more. So what about if we've got, 2 children turn up, and the idea that this is now full? And what we do at that stage, this is usually with nursery, but it could be with reception, which is nursery 3 and 4-year-olds in the UK, reception 4 and 5-year-olds. So make your links there with whatever you call those age groups. But typically nursery, but if your reception children, your 4 and 5-year-olds haven't had this experience, or 5 and 6-year-olds even, start here. But what I'm going to do is, you and I know 2 5s equal 10 and make what we call a 10 frame. But these children are too young to understand or even care very much about this number 10 yet. They can say it, but they won't understand what it is mathematically. So what we do is we have another 5 frame. Sorry about that. It'll bother some people, won't it? Make it straighter, Karen. Okay, so this child here needs to start a new 5 frame, and you get this sense that there's lots of space there. So this is about full and not full. It is not about 5 yet. That's a big deal for us as practitioners to get our heads around and to back off with. Really important. So the next thing to look at is, because you have been doing, and I said I was going to go fast here, don't forget you can rewind these and watch them because they're recorded, stored in the guides. So let's have a look at, for example, we've been doing work with the children. They've been spotting 2 things. Yesterday I looked at things in nature like flowers. You could use stones, you could use conkers and seeds. My rule is, and you might want to jot this down even if you watch this again, is when things are natural, to keep the cognitive load low, they need to be similar size, similar colour, similar shape, because Mother Nature doesn't make things that are that identical. So low cognitive load anyway, because it's nature, but keep things very, very similar. When something is man-made, human-made, like these counters and this washer here, which I've just stuck a little bit of magnetic tape to the back of, which you can get on a reel. Don't go off shopping to Amazon just yet, wait. But you see, look, you can tell I was a teacher. So here, when they are man-made, same colour, same shape, same size. Because can you see, if you start mixing things, your brain gets really distracted. Whereas same colour, same size, same shape, whether it was the washers are a little bit more interesting, so raised cognitive load, be careful. Oop. You really want to make sure children have got some sense of subitizing before you introduce anything that's got a little bit more interest. So our children have been noticing, as I say, what 2 looks like, what 3 looks like, what 1 looks like. So that was their perceptual subitizing. And then we started to be doing our self-registration. Imagine these are the photographs. And the children will start to make that connection if we draw their attention to it, that there are 2 spaces, because that 2ness is still there. It's the 2ness they saw here. And particularly when it gets to only being 1, even though that shape is different, this idea of the one-to-one correspondence here, oh, there's only room for 1. So they're starting to link their subitizing with this idea of full and not full, which is really, really vital. We're also looking at what we call in mathematics unitizing. which is where you finish a group of a certain size. So we have a predetermined size, which in this case is 5, and we're filling that 5. So I hope that makes sense as to why we are not skipping on to 10 yet. Really important as well, because the 2 5s equals 10 is going to be the foundation of lots of efficient calculation when children are much older. So I'm talking about children in Key Stage 2, which is 7 to 11 in the UK, and even older than that, because it's the foundation of your ability to add, subtract, multiply, divide, use decimals, fractions, and all sorts. Mind-blowingly good when you have this in your toolbox. Okay, so I'm just going to look at my feed there and see. Just to remind you, oh, there we go, Lucy's put a question. If you want to put a question, please put a capital Q at the start like Lucy has. And if you are catching up, just put a little hashtag catch up. And if you want to ask a question later, it is better to tag me in it, because then I'll get an alert. So here we go. Lucy, if you are using 2 5 frames for nursery self-registration, would you use photos or counters? Right, so good question, Lucy. Oh, it's getting bigger. Don't know why. Oh my goodness, tapping on things. When you are working on self-registration with children, use their faces to begin with, because you're using this full and not full. However, Lucy, if you decide to come into Impact, which is my monthly membership, we look at self-registration in there, where we take them through from photographs through to photographs and names, through to photographs, names and cubes. And you can do it with counters, but we do it with cubes because then you can actually build some towers, and you can start, when you start moving into 10, you can have finished 10s of one colour and part finished 10s of another. So there is training available to you in Impact, which is, say, is my monthly group, no tie-in. You can pop in and grab all the resources and do the learning. You don't have to stay. We'd love you to stay, but you don't have to. Incredibly affordable as well. So a year in Impact is cheaper than a one-day course. So go and have a look at it and see what you think. But good question. I think the thing to think about with cognitive load is when you're dealing with their photographs to begin with, it's more about one-to-one correspondence, and them, it's really meaningful to them. They're filling this up. Something you could do as well that I haven't said is, if you make your 5 frames quite a bit bigger than your photographs, just play around with this. You could have different sizes. But the nice thing is, let me make this clear. Can you see how this is much bigger than this? Children will tend to instinctively only put 1 in each. You'll find children, again, it's part of their schema. But if they're much bigger, you can see whether children understand this 1 per section rule, this kind of one-to-one correspondence. If you make the 5 frames exactly the same size as the photograph, you can't tell whether they know there's that's only 1 per cell, as it were, because obviously it fills the whole cell. So I hope that makes sense as well. Okay, right, so let's have a look. Let's go forward a little bit now. Again, don't forget, this is a lot of training, and this is like we're skimming across the top. If you want more depth, we will be doing a lot of this in the Sunflower Challenge with seeds and pots and children and so forth. And then there are ways that I can teach you to do this, which takes, a much longer time, but obviously you have an amazing tool in your toolbox then. So, okay, let's have a look. So we have looked at, for example, subitizing 1 to 3. We've seen what 1 looks like in the 5 frame. We've seen what 2 looks like. We've seen what 3 looks like. And in time, when we have built our conceptual and perceptual subitizing, so again, there's a lot going on with what I'm explaining here, but a child has to get to the point where they can reason, that's still 3 because I can see a 2 and a 1, or I can see in a 2 and a 1, so therefore it's 3, before we do this. And a child can then reason, well, it's not 3. And you're like, well, why? What do you see? And they, well, if it was 3, it'd be a 2 and a 1, and it's a 2 and a 2. So they've not only got, before we even focus on the number 4, the name or the digit 4, they're reasoning it can't be a 3. And I can see 2s, but it's not 2 because there's a 2 there and a 2 there. They're dealing with the properties of this number, which is really, really important. They might even be able to reason that, well, it's 1 more than 3 because that's 3 and it's another 1. This is really, really important. How different is that than learning that that is 3 and that is 4, okay? Whether it's like that or on a number line. You're giving them what we call concept images. So if I put that number, that amount, which I may or may not know the name of, on a 5 frame, you can see it does something different. It only leaves 1 space, whereas when we had 3, there were 2 spaces. So the 5 frame is showing you its relative size to a finished unit in terms of the adult way of looking at it. So then we would develop conceptual subitizing with this. We could also do some perceptual, seeing it all in one go, but you could reason with a child, you know, for example, what do you see? And they might say, well, I can see a 3 and a 1, and someone else says, I can see 4. How do you know it's 4? You know, what do you see? Well, I saw a 3 and a 1, and I know that there's a 3 and a 1 in 4, and they can arrange it in whatever pattern they like. Then we add another one. We can reason this isn't 1, it isn't 2, it isn't 3, it isn't 4, because of what's in it and what you can do. When we put this one on our 5 frame, whoa, very exciting, because humans do tend to like things to have what the Americans call closure, like nice finishedness about it. So we have filled a 5 frame. But what happens, because we've got, there's a lot, again, there's a lot more to this. We could talk about the fact that you can see the 3 and the 2 there, and the 3 and the 2 were still in here, and you can find them, the 2, 2 and the 1, the 2, 2 and the 1, and so forth. But what happens when this comes along? And the same children, if you think about, many of you will have gone way above 5 without your children having these skills. And that's why they count, because it's the only way they can find out how many. They haven't got a sense of numbers in numbers yet. They haven't developed conceptual subitizing. And because conceptual subitizing is hard and involves far more reasoning, that's why you need to stick to 3, numbers to 3 to begin with. So go back and watch the masterclass from yesterday. Watch it as many times as you like. Come on the group, ask questions to make sense of what I'm saying here. Because you'll probably find what I'm saying makes sense, but it's like you're wearing it on the outside, and you need time for this to go in. You need time to do it with your children. When you know the right stuff, you cannot break your children, so you must try it out on them. But you cannot say, I want to do this perfectly and I don't want anything to go wrong, which is what a lot of practitioners feel like because of the pressure on us. That doesn't work in learning. You've got the right tool, you just need to learn to use it. Okay, and I say that to all of my members all the time. So if you're anything like me and you're anything like them, listen to those words, because you know you will feel like that to begin with. So here we've got this time. Again, we can reason. It's not 5 because 5's got a 3 and a 2 in it, and 2 2s and a 1 in it, and so forth. This one's got 3 2s in it. Even before we know what it's called, we can find out about it. It's got a 4 and a 2 in it. It's got a 1 and a 1 and a 1 and a 3 in it. And the work I do on subitizing really helps you to pull this apart, not just into 2 groups. If you're a practitioner that's been given the cherry model, or you would have a 6 at the top, and you're only splitting it 2 ways, how are your children ever going to understand division? How are they going to understand unequal sharing? So here with 6, look, we could have a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1. That's 4 groups. It's not just a cherry model. You could have a 2 and a 2 and a 2, which you need to understand to link multiplication and division, and also fractions and so forth. And we know this. So you think, why haven't we questioned why that cherry model, or even those words part, part, whole? That implies you're only splitting it 2 ways, so be careful. Basically, be a user, not a follower, is my mantra. So let's put these in here and see what happens. And your children will have experienced this already, because they now know that you need another 5 frame. They've experienced this in their self-registration. But as we move on, at an appropriate time, we introduce the children to this idea that 2 5 frames go together to become a new unit, which is called 10. Now they're going to have heard about 10, they might very well recognize 10, they might be able to count up in rote to 10, or even count up using all the appropriate skills. But what we're looking at here from an adult point of view is our unitizing, that a finished unit of 5 and a finished unit of 5 gives us a finished unit of 10. And this is what our entire number system is built on. So as adults, you are dealing with the base 10 system all day, every day. Right, I'm going to go above 10, but I am not going to do this, because that's not what the base 10 system does. The base 10 system says you finish a 10 and then, so make sure you can see these. I normally put these further apart, but because of the camera, I'm going to put them a little bit closer together than I normally would. Keep these well apart, otherwise it's harder to see. But the idea here, this is a finished 10 and this is another 10. Okay, so or rather this would be finished if it was all filled. So that's a complete 10 and that's a complete 10. So what we start doing then is we can have a look at, if I take these ones off for the moment, I'll put those back on and do something to finish today. But we have gone up to 6 here and we talk about what can we see. Well, this 6 is a finished 5 and one of the next 5. Well, let's have a look. Let's take these off, because we're going to do this in 2 ways now. Because we've now got 2 5 frames, we can learn 2 different patterns, and we want our children to have what we call concept images of number. And a concept image is when you don't just see the digit, you see what it really is. The best way to describe a concept image, and you can see me talking about this on YouTube with Kathy Brody. I always forget Kathy's name, sorry, her surname. Kathy Brody, when I did the early years TV interview, and you go and see me do this a little bit more. But for example, if I write that and ask you to put it in your hand and describe it, you will not describe A-P-P-L-E. You will not tell me there's a P in the middle. You would be imagining a real apple. And if I said, what does it smell like? You wouldn't be like, well, it smells like ink. You think, that sounds crazy, because you're not imagining how it's written. You're imagining the real thing, the concept. So your concept image of an apple is a real apple. We need our children to have a concept image of each number. And once we get above 10, that's just going to be a finished 10 and some of the next, and we'll come to that probably in the challenge, not today. So for example, if I want to develop a concept image of this number, being able to write it, being able to say it does not mean I understand what it is. And also 3 has actually got more than one way of being thought about. We're just looking at what's called cardinality here, which is the how manyness of a number. So I'm going to get my 3. As a child, I know what 3 looks like now. It doesn't matter on the arrangement, and I'm used to doing this. So that is one image of 3 in relation to a finished group. And we talk about what can we see. Well, we've still got 2 spaces here, and this whole 5 here is empty. This picture here, this image, which you and I know is 7, becomes really important as well. But what's lovely here is I'm going to call this the 5s pattern, what we just did there, because we fill a 5. And then I'm going to call the next one the 2s pattern. If you do NCETM training, they call it the pairs pattern. Again, I would step back from that and think, right, pear can also be a fruit. And also you have to understand what pairs means. You have to have that understanding of 2 things. And we talk about things like a pair of pants, where there's only actually one of them. So be careful, use language that's meaningful to children. I don't really understand where that pairs came from. I'm not sure, I mean, children will get past it, but why make it more hard, more difficult from the beginning? I'm going to call it the 2s pattern. And the 2s pattern fills a 2 and then starts to fill another 2. And those of you who work with Numicon, I'm a fully trained Numicon consultant, you will start to recognize this is the pattern that Numicon uses. If you want information on Numicon, I'm going to do some sessions for Impact members, because it's not about not using it. And someone quite rightly the other day said, I've got loads of this stuff, it costs a fortune, but use it in the right way. Because just putting Numicon pieces on top of each other is more like jigsaws. You have to have a lot more going on than doing what just some of us are doing. And again, I was the same until I knew what I didn't know, shall we say. So let's have a look at another number. What does a number that looks very similar to a 2, I think, of course, because children naturally reverse things, and that's very normal up to maybe even 7 and 8 for some children. Doesn't mean they've got a problem. So I know what 5 looks like. I've looked at it lots of times as a child, so I know it's got a 3 and a 2 in it and a 4 and a 1 in it. Let's put it on here. When I build the 5s pattern, and I won't get into this now, but you know I'm talking, so I'm not counting. This is a really important part of it as well. You do not want to count, because the whole point is you don't need to count. You know it's a 5 because it's created the 5 pattern, because the 5 pattern is when that first 5 is filled. Take it off again. Don't just rearrange it. Move that one out of the way. Let's have a look at what the 5s pattern looks using the 2, or look at what 5 looks like using the 2's pattern. So I'm filling up the 2's like this, and you can see it looks very, very different. We've got the 4 and the 1, and we've also got the 4 and the 1 that isn't filled yet. We've got a 3 and a 2. I wonder if I put it back like that, and again, I would always take them off and put them back on again so children can see what's happened. Can you still see the 3 and the 2? Can you still see the 4 and the 1? They're still there, they just look really different. And having these 2 images of numbers is going to help your children enormously. So I'll just finish with one more. This takes a long time to build it, but this is the same as what the training I do gives you. It's, you know, this idea about build these steps. We've got to understand it thoroughly. We've got to believe in it thoroughly, and then it will come out in your teaching. So here's 6, finished 5 and 1 of the next one. And if I took them all off, which I won't because of time, there we've got a 6 that looks very different. But you know, as an adult, that is such a useful image of 6. If I was to say how many more to equal 10, you can see you'd need 4 more. And if I was adding, for example, 5 more, we can do this in 2 different ways. Let's just do a quick bit of calculation here. There's so much more to show you, which I won't today because it's a mini masterclass. But if I was going to add this many, can you see that because of my conceptual and perceptual subitizing skill as a child, I think, well, there's 4 there, but 5 is a 4 and a 1, so I can just fit 4 on here. And the other one is going to have to go on a new 10 frame. Now, they're used to the idea of a new one when you can't fit it on, because we started with our 5 frames. But now we've introduced the idea that actually we work in a base 10 system, but they've got that same understanding. So that one is going to have to go here. And of course, I could continue building the 2's pattern like that. So I've got 1 whole 10 or 1 finished 10 and 1 of the next 10, hence why 11 is written like that. If I'd created this number, my calculation had been different. So it would have been 6 plus 8. Can you see we've got 1 whole 10 or 1 finished 10 and 4 of the next 10. Listen to my language. It's not just 1 10 and 4 more, or 1 10 and 4 1s. It's 1 10 and 4 of the next 10, because that's what we're always aiming for. All numbers are trying to become a finished 10. You can almost personify it in that way. So lots of things there. Remember, that can and should be shown vertically as well as horizontally. Hopefully you can start to see how you can make connections with, we want to build these things outside. We want to use things with low cognitive load but completely different sizes. I make 10 frames using bean poles, using fence panels, using tablecloths is the one that's been going viral that Liz posted on our group. You don't want to just confine this to the board. Children need to be able to do this with big stuff, little stuff, and ultimately what we're going to do in the Sunflower Challenge is children, there's no point in teaching any of this. And this is going to sound so strange, me saying this. This is not my destination. My destination is for them to know, well, I've got 6 pots, but I need 10 pots. How many more pots do I need? And look at how, what we did here. You want to plant 10, could be sunflowers, could be something else. You lay out your pots in the 6 pattern on a 10 frame outside, and the children, you say, well, you said you wanted 10, and they're like, yeah, we need 4 more. And then they're going to know what 4 is because they're using their conceptual subitizing. Does that make sense? You've also got this idea then of going on to the teen numbers. I won't go start on this because I'll start ranting. But people say the teen numbers are so hard to teach. No, they're not. I am going to say categorically, they are not. If you teach it like this, if you teach that that's 14 and the most important thing is what you say and how you write it, you're going to have big problems. If your children are taught using 10 frames, they will tell you, so let's get rid of that, because that is just like writing apple. It's not what an apple is. It's just a recording of apple. Different word in every language that you all speak. Look at this. 1 finished 10, let's write it down, and 4 of the next 10. So the child learns the other way around than we were taught. You don't learn this and then try and work out what it looks like. You learn this and you think, when you see this, I see a finished 10 and I see 4 of the next 10. So later on, if you say to them, what do I need to add to equal, for example, 21, I hope you can see that okay if I just pull it that way a little bit. That means 2 finished 10 frames and 1 of the next 10 frames. So that would be all of that, and another 10 frame here with 1 on it. And you think, okay, so imagine you're going to need all of those and 1 of this. So now we're doing maths that a 7-year-old would have to do, and we're using exactly the same skills. Okay, so to recap, and I'm going to see if there's any questions anybody would like to ask. The reason I'm doing this is because in the Sunflower Challenge, and the Sunflower Challenge has got planting sunflowers in it, but that's not what it is about. It is about me absolutely radically transforming your approach to maths teaching. It is about embedding your maths teaching in meaningful learning, in transient art, in fine and gross motor skills, in science, and linking all of your maths in a way that, you know, this is high level stuff. This knocks any curriculum goals out of the water, because you are developing your knowledge so you can do this with the children. And we are going to use the vehicle of growing things and nature, and of course have our sunflowers in there, and I'll talk to you a bit more about the measure side of that and the shape side of that tomorrow and the next day. So let's have a look. Oh, so now Borbala, am I saying your name correctly? We had a little bit of a chat. It is, do you know, Borbala, you, if I'm saying your name right, you are just so perfect for EYMaths, because you're having those wow bombs that Emily above you, and, you know, if I scroll back through, you know, all of my members that have been with me, whether it's been a couple of months or I've been doing this 2 years exclusively for early years, we call it going to the other side of a mountain. Because you're on one side of the mountain and you think, oh, you know, I think I'm doing okay. Or, do you know, it's not quite right, but I don't really know what yet. And then we do this together and we go the other side of the mountain and we go, blimey, why did no one tell us this stuff? And when you've been teaching as long as I have, I had quite a lot of kind of feeling guilty, but I had to get past that. Right, so I'm going to go backwards because that's easier for me to do. Let's... I may not be able to answer all of these without training, but let's have a look here. So can you have 5 frames that are already full with colour to 20, then change the next 5 frame to the number of the class? Does this make sense? Kind of. I might need a little bit more explanation there. Give me a little bit more. I don't know who that is, sorry, but what I'm suspecting from the little bit you've told me there is I wouldn't be heading for how many children are here today, which is the question that all adults want to ask, but children are not that bothered. We ask so many questions in maths that actually, if you just slow down, we seem to always want to know how many things there are in total. And yet in real life, you very rarely need to know that. What you need to know is things like, are there enough? You know, when you're working out problems for yourself in the kitchen, is there enough to go around? How many can someone have each? You very, very rarely need to know the total. Or if you do, it's only because you've asked that question. But for some weird reason, particularly in the early years, and I did this myself, we're always asking children how many things there are in total. It's like, who cares? They're more interested, for example, in who's not here today. And when you put up your self-registration, the people who aren't here today, their pictures will still be in the basket. So my shorter, long-winded rant there, my shorter answer would be spend less time thinking about the total number, because that isn't the most important thing and they're not that bothered. Spend more time, go back and spend more time thinking about these full 5s. And again, it doesn't matter how many full 5s. I think if we stop and think, a lot of this is driven by us, like, but I need to know how many 5s I need to know, and we will get there. There are things I can do with you. I haven't got them handy, but with my impact members, we look at using cubes when they're ready to look at those full 10s and do how many children are here, but in a meaningful context, and we link that to other mathematics as well. So I hope that's helpful. You see, when I'm very passionate, so you get very long answers. All right, Lucy, let's have a look. If you are using 2 5 frames for nursery self-registration, would you use photos or counters? No, you already asked that, sorry. I think double whammy there. Okay, no problem about spelling my name wrong. Honestly, typing, not a problem at all. Poor teaching has left me dreading maths at school, and even teaching, and this excites me. Right, whoever you are, You can pop your name for me in the chat. I hated maths at school. I failed maths at school. I failed maths for the first 10 years of my teaching degree, and I hid in early years and in Key Stage 1. And then I had the opportunity to do some learning, maybe along the lines of what I'm doing with you now. And for the first time in my life, I thought, it isn't me and it isn't maths, it's the way I've been taught. And then in 10 years on from that was an international maths consultant with my own business. I didn't have a brain transplant. The only thing that changed was my mindset, because I was given information that made me change what I thought I could learn, because I was exactly like you, honestly. And I had to teach myself everything. You are now in the position where you can come and learn with me, and you can learn a lot quicker than I did. But you are honestly, you're not alone. So I'm really glad you shared that. Yeah, Dyscalculia, definitely. I've been doing this sort of stuff for a really long time, and I have kept getting the message from most of all the children, which matters the most, but from experts that I've worked with, that, you know, this is exactly what children with special needs, dyscalculia, need. My belief is when you do things right for children who struggle with learning, you get it right for children who don't even more. And to be honest, there is a percentage of children who have genuine special needs. I'm the auntie of one of them, very severe special needs. The majority of children who come across as having special needs, it's just they can't memorize. And it's our teaching that needs to change. And the first thing that needs to change is us, because you will not say things differently and do things differently if you don't change your belief system and you don't have this epiphany yourself. So I invite you to come on a journey where I help you feel differently about yourself. And even if you're watching this and thinking, I feel fine, my kids are doing great, honestly, there is something in this for you as well, because we genuinely don't know what we don't know. And I do this all day, every day, and there isn't a single day that goes by when I don't find myself thinking about something in a different way, which I just love. So I hope you're the same. Emily says, yeah, you'll never look back. Honestly, I can see you two as friends in the group. This will be fantastic. So let's have a look. I'm going backwards, so it may not make sense. Any more questions, anyone? Oh, you're very kind. Learn something new every time you listen. Oh, I'm so glad. Especially if I'm running them at 4 o'clock. I do make a lot more sense. Do a lot of morning sessions in Impact, don't we? Because brains work well. Right, I've got a lot of highs, which is great. Oh, this is lovely. Thank you. I'm sorry I don't know who. I'm just going to click on that one, get rid of that one. I love this way of teaching. We get so much from all children using these methods and language. Yeah, again, my Impact members who are on the call, if you're still there, Impact members, tell us in the chat box the impact this has had on your children's language development. The impact that, you know, people like Katie in the group works in an area of real, like many of you, incredible deprivation, exacerbated by COVID. We have seen children's brains open up, and the language and the confidence and the expressiveness that's had a massive knock-on impact to the whole curriculum. Just wonderful. I know Zofia, who, I'm not sure if Zofia's on, but I always quote her as saying, when Zofia first came into Impact and we did the Teaching Essential Number Sense together course, and we talked about noticing and being a really, really good listener and having a neutral face, she said, I'm just so much more relaxed with the children. I just really feel like I'm being myself. I'm not being like the teacher version of me. So there she is. Yeah, Zofia's there. Massive, says Zofia. Emily says, here you go, Emily. Emily with the great nails. Emily, you must post a picture of your great nails and show everybody. Talk about subitizing. The impact on vocabulary blows my Key Stage 1 and 2. Oh, sorry, yeah. So is it 1 and 2 teachers away? So Emily has been with me long enough now, as many of you have, to see the impact of the reception and nursery children moving up. And in every case, we have then seen a gap. So when we were first working with nursery and reception, we saw then that they had such well-developed number sense that we noticed the year 1s and 2s really didn't have this. And of course, that's the same for children who are older as well. You don't suddenly develop this thing. You know, if you haven't got it, you haven't got it. And then these children have now moved up, and we're starting to see this incredible strength and fluency, and teachers having much better conversations about, it's not about just saying, oh, early years matters and the foundation start in early years. That stuff does not count for toffee if you don't know what that means. So when you have a child in Key Stage 2, so 7 to 11-year-olds, who is adding a 7 and a 5 by going 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or head nodding, that child has not got number sense. Very few people recognise that it's this built on subitizing, and it's the stuff they do in nursery and reception. It's not just important, it's the skill that they need to be using in Key Stage 2 that they haven't got. Same with decimals. I won't go into that now, but when you were calculating with decimals, when you were learning your times tables, this is what we need them to have. It really, really works because it's the base 10 system. No trickery about it or anything. Oh yeah, do you know, so tell me, did I say your name correctly? Bobala, I don't know, but I say do tell me where to put the emphasis on your name. Because I know we had a chat, didn't we, over a little conversation exchange, and you'll be perfect. Get as many parents involved in this as well, and you have to do a lot less job saying to parents, you know, yes, counting's important, but we need to do this first. Get them doing the challenge as well. They're going to get so much out of it. Okay, so let's have a look here. So I don't know who this is, but you can pop your name below if you want. Moved into reception in January. The way this has changed the class is unbelievable. Oh, somebody tell me who this is. Pop your name in the chat box for me. One of the children shocked me and the head teacher when he came up to the board and said, the points on these stars are 15 altogether. It took us a moment to realise what the child was talking about, and there were 3 stars on the board. So oh wow, so it was like 5-pointed stars. Well, we're seeing children in snack who are literally like taking 3 bits of apple. They notice the child next to them's only got 2 bits of apple. They go and get another one, and so they then know they've got the same amount. And this is children who are 3 years old, who the practitioners would have said quite rightly, this child can't count yet, this child can't recognise any digits yet, this child can't say any number names yet. And yet now we're noticing that child saw 3, saw 2, understood the difference was 1, got 1, and made them equal. How amazing is that? And the only thing that is changed is the practitioner's understanding of what they're seeing. So, okay. Right, I've gone well over my half an hour. I hope that has been useful. If you were in any doubt of how enthusiastic and passionate I am about this stuff, and of course that counts for nothing unless you've got knowledge. I pride myself on checking my subject knowledge. Anybody who saw the post today, you need to have somebody in your life, preferably in book form, and we'll talk about this on the Sunflower Challenge, that you can turn to make sure that you are not just relying on what you know, not good enough. Yeah, generations of well-intentioned practice leading to problems, and we'll talk a bit more about that tomorrow. All right, take care everybody, have a good rest of the day wherever you are, and see you soon.